is today. And I think I want to commend the Minister that, for engaging in such a proactive way with all of the stakeholders on this bill. I think there isn't, while there are certainly disagreements over some of the technicalities and some of the principles indeed that are being debated, the fact that the bill is here and that the bill is in many regards very progressive compared to some of the legislative frameworks that are in existence in other European states is a very positive thing. I think it's a sign that we are not living in the dark ages anymore, that these issues, which to be honest, and we can all, I think, most of us be able to say that that is not something we'd be very familiar with, or that is something that is rare. The fact that it is getting the attention that it deserves and the recognition that it deserves, I think, is to be very much welcomed. I have read a number of commentators from the human rights sphere, for example, who have criticised the bill as being, rather than being to the avant-garde or to the fore, that they're criticising it as being in some way a lesser bill. I'm not sure I agree with all of the analysis that has taken place, but I think that the second stage, which we're at the moment, is the place to air those. There is the suggestion by some commentators that the ability should be, that it shouldn't be required that one professes the gender and exclusively assign oneself to that gender for the foreseeable future, or for forever indeed, that it should be possible to switch back. That is one of the switch, again, that a person's gender identity is something that can change over a period of time. And whilst no one would say that the decision is taken lightly to opt for a different gender recognition, but that if the circumstances do indeed change, that should be possible. There is also, as has been mentioned by previous speakers, the contention about the age upon which an applicant for gender recognition can assign it. And I think that we are all aware that for some young people, some children, that can be very much at a very early stage where they know instinctively that the gender on their birth certificate is not the gender with which they identify. And I'd hope that we can maybe look at those in the committee stage and really tease it out a bit further, because it does seem to me that if there is such a certainty, that we possibly should be able to look at it. I do accept, however, if you look at the law as it relates to medical procedures, for instance, in this state, and the ability of a minor to give consent, that has been developed over a number of cases, and the jurisprudence very much surrounds the age of 16, and as that being the age upon which one can actually give an informed consent to such a procedure. Now, I'm aware, and I want to thank the Minister for bringing it from 18 to 16. That was one of the things that she succeeded in. However, maybe we should look at putting in a clause that looks at exceptional cases, that does look in cases where it is extremely, resonant that should be the case. I want to say that these kind of bills, and this bill in particular, means an awful lot to the people who are affected. I think that with, hopefully, the passing of the referendum, as nearly supported by all sides of the House, that will take place in May, that we will be able to deal with that issue of the compulsory dissolution of marriages in those instances. But I do recognise, and I think it has to be recognised, that the Constitution as it currently exists and it currently formulates and defines marriage would not allow for that to continue. I know there have been examples in Germany, for instance, where they have been able to legislate. I don't think we are, given our legal and constitutional framework, able to follow that model, and it will require the people to make that decision. And I think, therefore, that when we are campaigning on that referendum, those who are in favour of a yes, that this is yet another reason. This is yet another, I think, another point of contention and point of reason that we need to use this to further that argument that this referendum needs to pass. So I do very much welcome this bill. I think it's an important progress. I think there is the possibility in committee stage for further progress, and I commend and hope that all parties and the Minister will engage in that constructively.
I'll call Deputy Sean Kenny.
Thank you, Alaskan Corla. This legislation demonstrates how far Ireland has come in terms of social progress in recent years. While this is very welcome, it also has to be said that the reality is that Ireland is currently the only country in the European Union that has no provision for legal gender recognition. So in reality, we are merely catching up. The delay up to now in introducing gender recognition legislation has left transgender and intersex persons without formal legal status and has significantly impacted upon their ability to access services. The publication of this bill marks progress. The bill will give formal legal recognition to the preferred gender of transgender persons through the issuing of a gender recognition certificate by the Department of Social Protection. This will mean the person's preferred gender will be fully recognised by the state for all purposes, including the right to marry or enter a civil partnership in the preferred gender and the right to a new birth certificate. The bill uses the term, a quote, preferred gender, unquote, which is in line with the recommendation of the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Social Protection and Education during the pre-legislative scrutiny process. This approach also facilitates application for gender recognition for people with intersex conditions. I believe that this is a progressive bill, and I would like to see it enacted as early as possible so that members of the transgender community are able to avail of the opportunity to have their preferred gender formally recognised. Once the bill becomes law, a person who is issued with a gender recognition certificate will be officially legally recognised by the state as being of the preferred gender from that day forward. They will be recognised in the preferred gender for all purposes, including dealings with the state, public bodies, and civil and commercial society. They will be entitled to marry a person of the opposite gender or enter a civil partnership with a person of the same gender. They will be entitled, where relevant, to a new birth certificate that shows the preferred gender and new names if names are also changed. The application process for gender recognition will be administered by the Department of Social Protection. The application process consists of a statutory declaration by the applicant that they intend to live permanently in the new gender and a validation by the primary treating physician that the person has transitioned or is transitioning to the preferred gender. The process will not require details of care, including medical history or confirmation of a diagnosis, nor will the person have to confirm that he or she has been living in their preferred gender for a specific period of time prior to their application. The bill requires that an applicant for gender recognition be single, pending the outcome of the referendum on same-sex marriage due to take place in May of this year. The Joint Oireachtas Committee has also recommended that the minimum age for gender recognition be reduced from 18 years to 16 years. The bill also provides for applicants from 16 and 17-year-olds, but with significant safeguards attached, which seek to balance the rights of such applicants with the need to protect their interests at a vulnerable age. In particular, it would be necessary to secure a court order in any such cases, exempting the applicant from the standard requirement of a minimum age for gender recognition of 18 years. The ICGP have been keen to see the definition in the legislation of, quote, primary treating medical practitioner, unquote, expanded to include general practitioners. I support them in this for a number of reasons. GPs are more than capable and fully qualified to fulfil the certification duties under the legislation, as well are more likely to going to be familiar with the circumstances of the applicant and therefore well placed to provide a verification of the individual's medical transition. GPs would also be the first point of contact for most transgender people seeking healthcare, and I would monitor the medical transition under transgender after transgender people have engaged in specialist services. I believe that having a local GP involved will be of great benefit to transgender people. Recently I have met with the people from Tenny this week. Some of the people I had already met. One of them was a work colleague some years ago. Another person I met was a public representative back in the 1980s. And I must say I wish them every success under this bill in having their gender recognised. Transgender people have been and still are marginalised in society, and I think it's well past time this changed. There is more work to be done in the coming years, and I strongly recommend this legislation to the House. Thank you.
Deputy Anne Ferris.
Thank you, Last Kincorla. Before I begin to speak on the bill, I would like to place on the record of the Dáil my deep appreciation for two brave women whose lifelong work has led to the point where, for all of its flaws, we are here discussing this bill today. Lydia Foy is a champion of gender equality. Her commitment to human and gender rights has inspired Irish people affected by these issues, young and old, women, men and intersex, to speak up and have their voices heard. 100 years ago, the gender recognition fight was about achieving votes and equal rights for women. That fight is still only partially won. Women occupy just 16% of the seats in this chamber, a sad statistic in international terms. We still have a long way to go in this country before women achieve equal rights with men. the road to gender recognition is indeed a very, very long road. For transgender women and men to get even on that road has been a long struggle. Lydia Foyle has led that struggle in Ireland. She deserves to be thanked by this House and at the same time apologised to publicly by this House. Lydia, it is shameful that it has taken you more than 17 years and 3 court cases to have the human rights of so many Irish people recognised by this Oireachtas. The other woman I wish to acknowledge in this Irish Parliament is an Englishwoman, Christine Goodman, who sadly passed away last December, just aged 77, after dedicating a lifetime to changing the laws in her country. Christine Goodman's success in the European Court of Human Rights was instrumental in the subsequent 2007 judgment of the Irish High Court that Ireland had breached Lydia Foy's human rights in a similar manner. The government of the United Kingdom responded within 2 years of the Christine Goodman judgment, introducing the 2004 Gender Recognition Act, while this state continued for another 7 years to deny human rights to thousands of people in this country affected by the Lydia Foy ruling. For 3 of those years, the former Fianna Fáil-led government had the audacity to challenge Lydia Foyle in the Supreme Court. To say that Ireland urgently needs gender recognition legislation is to state the obvious. But what we do not need is a near carbon copy of the 10-year-old British legislation. A lot has been learned in the past 10 years about how to legislate for this subject, and Ireland can gain from that knowledge. Deciding to disregard an official birth gender is not an easy choice for any individual to make. When such a significant life decision is made, then it should be trusted and respected, not second-guessed. If a medical fact is deemed to be absolutely necessary, then the word of a GP should be considered to be as valuable as any other medical expert. This legislation reflects nothing of what we know about the psychological damage that can occur if gender recognition is forcibly delayed beyond formative teenage years. This bill needs to be adapted to meet the specific needs of fragile young people. This bill ignores the existence of an intersex gender. I have significant concerns that the bill may in fact be unconstitutional in its requirement that married persons must divorce prior to a gender change being recognised. For the state to be contemplating legislation compelling a married couple to live apart for 4 years, then divorce, and for a family to be forcibly broken up is deeply worrying. Where human rights are concerned, it is my firm opinion that the Oireachtas should use all the tools at its disposal to repair what otherwise might be an unconstitutional bill. That was my opinion a few weeks ago when I voted in favour of the fetal abnormality bill, and it remains my position now. I support the passage of this bill to the next stage of the legislative process and trust that the members of this House can work together to achieve the necessary amendments. Alas, Corla, I'd like to take this opportunity to congratulate and to thank all the organisations, including TENI, all my colleagues in the Labour Party and friends and constituents in County Wicklow who've contacted me and spoken to me on this issue over the last 4 years, and just to promise them that I'll keep fighting the good fight. And I would also like to put on record my thanks to the Minister, because I know over the last 4 years she has done extremely hard work to get the legislation into the House today. Thank you.
The next speaker I call is Deputy Billy Timmins.
I'd like to welcome the introduction of this legislation, which is as a result of the campaign by Dr. Lydia Foy and others. Dr. Foy had been formally seeking a new birth certificate in her preferred gender for the past 21 years. The bill itself provides for the formal legal recognition of a transgendered person's preferred gender. This will be done through granting of a gender recognition certificate when the applicant has satisfied the criteria set out in the bill. A transgendered person will then be entitled to a new birth cert showing their preferred gender, to marry a person of the opposite gender or enter a civil partnership with a person of the same gender. The bill requires that an applicant for gender recognition be single pending the outcome of the referendum on same-sex marriage due to take place in May 2015. Alas, Corla, I suppose like most people in this House, I welcome this legislation. It's a subject that not many people are actually that familiar with or don't actually have an understanding with, and I just want to acknowledge the work done by those who are actually lobbying for this bill and informing me and educating me with regard to the actual aspects to it, and while there's broad welcome in it, I suppose that there is certain, I suppose, shortcomings in the bill, some of which are required to be there at the moment, others which are not. And it strikes me, if we bring in a bill like this in the first instance, that when it's brought in, we do it for a purpose, to facilitate people in obtaining a certain status. And I can never understand then why we proceed then to make it more difficult for people to achieve that status. And one of the concerns that have been pointed out to me is the fact that the certification by an endocrinologist to allow the actual process to take place, this would give rise to undue waiting list. After all, someone that seeks to go through this process, it's not the same as going into get a hairdo or change your favourite football team. It's a very, very serious and brave decision for people, and I can only imagine the trauma and difficulty that those people and their families actually went through. And I would hope by the passing of this legislation that that will cease to be, or certainly be limited in the future. But I do think that the Minister should look at actually reducing or changing the actual certification to one's a GP or a GP, because no one will know better than the person that presents themselves for this actual change. There's also the issue of the 16 to 18-year-old and making it more difficult for the 16 to 18-year-old. Now, I acknowledge that this is a difficulty because the issue of blocking at puberty was actually put to me, and this is something maybe I'd like the Minister to look at, if it means getting some expert medical advice or dealing with the stakeholders to take a look at, because this is a real important aspect to it, which we may overlook, which can, make life so much easier for people involved into the future. Basically, what we have here is a situation where a gender has been assigned to someone either incorrectly in the beginning, or over time that gender that has been assigned to them has changed for biological reasons. It's not an illness, it's not some sort of thing that lands overnight. It is just a fact of life, and the legislation should reflect that. Finally, the issue of divorce. One part of me, I wasn't aware until I read the supporting information on it, that married people to avail of it would have to actually divorce, and then it can't take place until the actual same-sex referendum is actually passed. And it would be regrettable if the same-sex referendum was defeated, that it actually gave rise to a situation where married people could not actually avail of this. And it makes me think, I'm a strong defender of equality. I'm also conscious of the fact, when you don't utter one mantra or one line here, that you can be open to ridicule and question. I see Deputy Buttermore, my good colleague, former colleague, or still colleague there. I know he's a strong advocate of the same-sex marriage, but when I read this legislation, I couldn't help but wonder, in that same-sex referendum, I believe that the majority of Irish people believe in equality, that everybody should be treated equally. And maybe it's an option that government should have looked at. I don't know. Maybe perhaps the Minister could, at the time when the legislation comes up, putting the same-sex marriage on an equal footing in the Constitution, rather than redefining the definition that's there at the moment. It's a moot point, maybe, but it's something I would be concerned about that could be played on in the months ahead and create uncertainty, muddy the waters. Because I think, by and large, if there was a vote on this gender recognition bill, I would say it would have overwhelming support. There's no room for ambiguity. It's a very factual, biological thing that we're trying to facilitate people that have certainly had a lot of difficulty. In addition, I do think there's an onus on all of us and our educators to actually examine the other aspects of this, aside from the actual administrative process, as to how people who are treated, particularly younger children, who society may see as male or female, and the individual themselves may feel the opposite as how they're seen by society. Be it someone that's in an all-male or an all-female school, there's a recognition by the authorities and the state that there has to be credence given to that position, and whatever necessary logistical steps or that are required, that are actually put in place, and there's an understanding, and it's not acceptable to say, well, that's an all-girls class. If there is a transgender person in that class at the time, so we have to put, I suppose, the physical mechanisms in place and an understanding of such people, and that we don't just look upon this bill as being an administrative process when someone gets to 16 and then the 18 plus to meet that requirement, and also that we look at maybe educating ourselves and society as to the needs of people who are caught in this situation much, much earlier in life, because many people, the recognition or the realization that they have been incorrectly assigned gender, or that their gender has changed over time, to try and meet, I suppose, the actual pragmatic, practical requirements of that change, I'm sure are very, very difficult, and it's important that any assistance that can be given by society at large, and particularly by state agencies, are actually put in place to make that much easier. So listen, I'll ask you here, or last Corla, I'll conclude in that remark and say that I fully support this bill, and that the shortcomings, which may be there for very good reasons, can be addressed as soon as possible.
Now, the next speaker is Deputy Jerry Buttimer.
Margaret, I would hope that Deputy Timmins is still my colleague and friend, so he may have strayed for a while, but he's always welcome back in the tent. There's a big tent in our house. You're always welcome. Today, last Corla, is a very important day. It's days like today, Minister, that one has a sense of pride of being a member of this Dáil and this house. And I say this, Minister, because if you cast our minds back to 30 years ago, those of us who were gay were discriminated against and were criminals. But those of us who are transgender, and I should say, last Corla, I'm sharing time with Deputy Coyne, is that's okay? Sorry, my apologies. Yeah, Margaret. As Deputy Lyne said, we're marginalised and we're cast to one side by a society that was uncaring, unkind. And this bill, Minister, and I want to commend you and Minister Burton for the work that you've done on it, whilst it's not to the perfection of everybody, whilst it isn't everything that you want or that I want, it is one that we can be proud of and we will vote for. And like Deputy Lyons, I'm not a latecomer to this debate and to this issue. And I cast my minds back last Corla to Waterford 2 years ago, to a trans conference in Waterford. And it probably was the most influential morning I spent in public life, because for all of my involvement in the gay community and the trans community, the enthusiasm of people in Tenny, of Vanessa, but of a mother who spoke of the love for her child and who spoke of the anguish and the upset in the house and the transformation to acceptance and love. And I'm doing her a disservice in my commentary, in my speech here. But it was probably the most influential few words I've ever heard. Because in that morning, it was an awakening in a real way. And there are people in the gallery last Corla today who are citizens of our republic, who deserve not just our words or our accolades, but they deserve everything that we can give them and more. And they're friends of ours, they're work colleagues of ours, and they're neighbours of ours. And they have worked diligently to bring about a bill that reflects the reality of life for them. And I'm so proud of them. So proud of them. And we talk about Lydia Foy, and she was the person at the front. She was the trailblazer. But behind her were people that we need to acknowledge in so many ways. And in our own Fine Gael LGBT group, we have a tremendous person in Claire who is so determined, so positive, and really wants to see change come, not just for her, but for all of our society. And I think of the many phone calls I have with Vanessa and Broden and Sarah and so many more, Sam and so many more, Sarah, people who want us to reach out. Hillary Clinton spoke about, shattering the glass ceiling. Well, that's what these people are doing in this country. And they may be disappointed, Minister, with the bill that's before us. And, we all accept in the ideal world we'd like to go a bit further. But in fairness to you, you've been receptive and open to engagement, and your door has always been open. And I had a huge speech written out like Deputy Lyons, but I'm not going to really use it because the arguments have been articulated. But today is a day that we can, hang out our brightest colours in celebration of the fact that in this Parliament, in this Dáil, in these House of the Oireachtas, we are acknowledging as a state our trans friends and saying, you are now a citizen of equality in our country. And even though they may argue that some of the equality is not probably fully there, it will be. It will be. And that long journey, those long nights of meetings, traveling the country, persuading and cajoling people, in a sense, to come out and tell their story, has worked and is working. And what we must do, more than anything ever, is to ensure that people who are on a journey can never be marginalised, can no longer be allowed to walk downtown and be hassled or cajoled or mocked, or can be sidelined by our state. And that's why today is so important, because it's the stories of people who have a right and an entitlement as citizens of our republic. And we must put that pall that was there to one side, and we must unveil a new Ireland of equal, of acceptance, and of love. And for the future children, this bill is so important, and this debate in this House is so important. And I think it's imperative that we acknowledge that when the bill passes, we will no longer be the only country in Europe without any legal provision for our trans friends. And so, Minister, in the journey that we've come to today, it is as a result of the brave campaigners who brought transgender issues to the public attention. It is because of the people who have lobbied and advocated. And it's a symbol and a sign on one level of the change that we've brought and the movement we've come as a country. But it also offers an affirmation of transgender people, intersex people. And it's saying that we as a state support these people in the challenges they face, and that we are prepared to walk with them to make things a little easier. And what this bill will do, and what this debate will do, and the attention arising from it, is it will bring to the attention of the wider society of our country the difficulties that transgender people and intersex people face as they go about their daily lives. And hopefully, by focusing attention, we can help to overcome the misconceptions, and we can challenge prejudice, and we can have a better place to live in. Because as Tenny have said in their debate pack for us today, that it is about the most vulnerable people. And I'm going to conclude, last Corla, because I know Deputy Coyne wants to speak, and I know Deputy Doyle, who's a very strong campaigner like Deputy Coyne, wants to speak. So I'll conclude by saying, in these few words, that this is a significant step. 22 years after Lydia Foyle began her campaign, we're putting in place formal recognition. It's been a long road, it's been a difficult road, it's been a road fraught with tension, but there's also time for celebration today. I want to commend Tenny and LGBT Noise and any other groups that have been involved, because they've helped to make our country a better place. The aim of this bill is to help people and make it easier for them to live their lives. Minister, I commend you for the work. I know you understand the issues that have been raised, and I haven't gone into them because of time. But I do hope that we can in some time come back to them and perhaps make this bill a better bill. But I commend you and the Minister for the work that you've done on this bill. Good morning.
Good morning, Now, I understand Deputies Sean Kine and Deputy Andrew Doyle are sharing, and there's we're going on to topical issues at 4:42. So, yeah. Deputy Kine.
Apologies as late as chairing the EU Affairs Committee, and I have to rush off after this to get to Galway for meetings this evening. I'd like to acknowledge the people in the gallery, and I met with Broden, Claire, Sam and Tanya yesterday of Tinney, and I'd just like to state that this bill is long overdue. It will finally provide a mechanism for transgender persons to acquire official recognition, a birth certificate of their true gender, and this is unfortunately taken 22 years, which I believe is outrageous. And Dr. Lydia Foy, who first sought a new birth certificate to show her gender as female as far back as 1993. Unfortunately, she was refused, and in the time-honoured tradition, the state commenced a battle through the courts, and the state indeed persisted even when a High Court judge declared for the first time that Irish law was incompatible with the European Convention on Human Rights. And it's deeply disappointing that the state chose to continue appealing decisions until the summer of 2010. And it's also disappointing that nearly 5 years after that has passed before the introduction of this gender recognition bill. Dr. Foy and her solicitor Michael Farrell and the Free Legal Advice Centres are to be commended for their work in getting us to this point. And the publication of this bill is very welcome, and will start the process of ending discrimination against one of the most marginalised sectors of our community here in Ireland. On a personal level, many of us are not familiar with the issues with which this bill addresses, and perhaps it's because of this lack of familiarity that reform has taken so long, and that so many people have had to endure problems caused by the law and by attitudes which the law has reinforced. It's difficult to imagine the challenges that trans persons face, but we have to try. We have to try and imagine what daily life can be like for a trans person in a world in which gender is so demarked. We have to try and imagine what it's like when one's feelings, one's identity and one's sense of self does not match the physical attributes on the outside. And it's only when we attempt to do this that we can begin to enact legislation that is meaningful and effective, legislation that will tackle problems and challenge discrimination. And it's clear when reading this bill that some people need to make a greater effort. The bill contains positive measures, but there are also glaring deficiencies. The bill is positive because with the bill, Ireland would finally join every other country in the European Union by putting in place a provision for recognising transgender persons. However, from meetings with TINI, the Transgender Equality Network of Ireland, with parents of trans persons, with constituents, it is clear that there are several areas of concern, and these issues need to be examined. And I appreciate others may have commented on these, but I would also like to put them on record. The first is the condition that a person be single before being able to avail of the provisions of the bill. In fact, this condition will mean that the state is seeking to break up existing relationships against the wishes of partners. And I realise that a yes vote in the forthcoming marriage equality referendum, which I dearly hope happens, will negate this condition. And while we're working towards securing this, I would urge the Minister to reaffirm its commitment to removing this passage or this condition without delay if the referendum succeeds. The second issue concerns the age requirements in the bill. The bill does not apply to persons under 16 years of age, and this is despite the fact that many trans persons are aware of their true gender long before the age of 16. It can be a very challenging time for families, and some parents have great difficulty with acknowledging it. Everyone must remember that gender is not a choice. We need to re-examine the bill so that we introduce legislation that helps both parents and the child, and a provision is needed so that parents can make an application under this bill on behalf of their children. And the third issue is medical recognition. Whilst the best system of recognition would be one similar to Denmark, which is based on self-declaration, this bill could be improved with the amendments to Section 2. I urge the Minister to widen the definition of medical professionals as set down in Section 2 to include general practitioners. A person's GP is very well placed to assist in meeting the medical criteria of this bill, and I note that the Irish College of General Practitioners would welcome such an amendment, as indeed would the IMO. And finally, Minister, I would acknowledge your commitment to review this legislation after 2 years. However, I think it can be in everyone's interest if the legislation could be reviewed after 1 year. Indeed, given that it has taken over decades to get to this starting point, any further delays in enacting the effective rights-centred gender recognition legislation would be completely unacceptable. And again, I'd like to commend you for your work on this, acknowledge the members of the gallery and their campaigns over the last number of years to see this bill to this stage. It's regrettable that it's taken so long, but I look forward to the committee stage in next week and safe passage after that. And again, sorry that I have to rush off.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Andrew Doyle, Deputy has 6 minutes.
Well, thanks, Cahill. Thanks to my colleagues for giving me time on this. And apologies, I just wanted to come in and briefly register my support on the record of the intent of this legislation. As others have said, it is long overdue. I'm afraid I was away on parliamentary business, so I'm not long back, and I've prepared maybe a written speech, but just to say that it's only because of a former schoolmate of mine actually approached me, who's present in the gallery, that I came to realise that, you know, the whole import and impact of this lack of legislation, lack of recognition of people who need and wish to have their gender alteration recognised legally, be given the same status as everybody else. As I said here during the Child and Family Relations Bill, people are good and bad. Their sexual orientation, their gender doesn't determine their qualities. There's a lot of other reasons why people are either good or bad, but I think everybody should be treated equally. As others have said, I think it is very important that we're a society of equals, that respect is given and tolerance is the norm in society, that people don't feel subjected to a bigotry or any sort of targeting just because of that they are, in inverted commas, different. So I think the positive is that at long last this legislation is coming before us, that gender recognition for people in this group is finally going to come to pass. I think it would be important, especially in view of the fact that there is a referendum coming up on same-sex marriage, that in the event that that is passed, and it's never certain, but if the current trends are anything to go by, it should be that this whole divorce single status issue is dealt with as quickly as possible, either by an amendment to this legislation when it's passed, or by regulation provision, regulation provided at this stage that says that it can change as soon as, if and when a referendum passes and makes it legal for people of the same sex to be married. So I think that can be done without having to have a whole raft of new legislation in the future. So I think committee stage can trash that out. I think likewise the issue about age limit, and there are medical, there are other concerns about people of a young age actually making decisions that are so life changing and so fundamental to what their future will be, that people under 16 but may not be fully capable of making those decisions. But I think the doctors and the parents and the child, if it's in this case themselves, need to be consulted, and there needs to be some compassion shown and understanding. And at all times, the best interest of that child is what should be considered, not what other people might consider they want, but what the child is best in the child's interest. So I appreciate that I've been given some time. I want to say that at the committee stage, I think it's important that all the outstanding issues that have been raised during following the publication of the bill by Tenny and others are actually taken on board. I think the Minister has shown good will towards that, and I would ask that that actually becomes a reality when the committee stage is going through the Houses next week. It is important that we do, after so many years of people waiting for this legislation, that it is fit for purpose. There's no point in bringing something in that is actually going to be seen to be well-intentioned but not workable. For some, maybe not for everybody. It certainly will, as it stands at the moment. It will certainly help a lot of people who have been alienated at the moment. So I commend the bill to the House. I wish the Minister well in considering it. I think it is important that we do take on board everything that has been said, because anyone that has made a contribution to this from the representative organisations is speaking from a point of expertise and understanding that a lot of people, including most people in here, wouldn't necessarily be as au fait with. And I listened to it earlier on the monitor to Deputy Lyons making an impassionate speech here. And I think if we take it in the spirit which he would wish in his contribution here, that we do it from the heart up, not from the shoulders up, that we actually embrace this legislation for what it is, we can make it right and we can make it fit for purpose for the future. So, thank you.
Thanks, Deputy Doyle. Minister, as you're aware, according to the order of the business of the day, we must finish this bill at 4:42. So I'm asking your position in relation to replies, which I know you want to so dearly give to all the contributions. Will that happen next week in the committee stage?
It will indeed, Chairman, but we just have 1 minute.
Okay, yep, no problem.
First of all, I very much welcome the debate here today. And I think Deputy Buckner and Deputy Lyon's contributions are really marked. The ones that were not scripted and spoken from the heart. Certainly when the Labour Party put this into the programme for government, certainly that conversation wasn't taking place in the greater public, and I very much welcome the debate that's happened in the Shannon here today, because now there's a much more broader understanding. There's just one element I'm just going to Deputy O'D mentioned about the scheduling of the committee stage. I just wanted to put it on the record that yesterday all the deputies were emailed in relation to when the committee stage was taking place, and that the deadline was 11 a.m. on Friday morning. Most of the parties, as a matter of fact, nearly all the parties have been able to confirm and have already got their amendments in, because there was quite a prolonged debate. We published the legislation just before Christmas. It has been in the Shannon. It was well flagged up a long way off. I certainly look forward. There's been many issues and I have many notes, and I will get an opportunity to deal with each individual one as we go through committee stage. So can I thank everybody for their contribution here today. I can thank the people in the gallery and for the attention, but above all, Dr. Foy for campaigning for so long. Like, this bill is 20 years in the making. It's 4 years since it went into the programme for government, and I welcome all those people that have it in this House that has now arrived to support the legislation. So thank you, Chair, and I move the bill.
Thanks, Minister. I now must put the question that the bill be now read a second time. Those in favour say tall. It's not agreed. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. I understand that it is proposed to refer this bill to the Select Subcommittee on Social Protection. Does the Minister wish to move the motion? Thanks, Minister. We now move on to the next issue. Matters selected on for topical issues. The first in the name of Deputy Andrew Doyle to the Minister for Environment, Community and Local Government, the provision of a specific class for the development of large-scale studio infrastructure under the Planning and Development Regulation 2001. And the Deputy has four minutes.
Yeah, I'm brave. Yeah. Thanks, Cahirla. I'm on the back-to-backs here, so just give me 1 second. Yeah, could I thank the Count Corley's office for listing this on the topical issues. He had sought last week some clarification. It follows on foot of, as people will know, Wicklow, at least I'd like to think so, is the real headquarters of the film industry in Ireland. For over 40 years, Ardmore Studios have been the lone ranger in this, in the provision of studios. In more recent times, larger studios have been provided in Ashford by Ashford Universal Studios under the O'Connell family. And so combined with the two, we have Ardmore, we have the film production headed up by Morgan O'Sullivan. And the Vikings in Ashford. So with that in mind, it's an action plan for jobs has a number of initiatives in it to help promote the industry, and one is to set up an expert review group to look at what it is that's necessary to assist in the provision of extra studio space. So on the ground, I can tell you that one of the problems is that at the moment outdoor film studios are classified under Class 4, Section 2 of the Planning and Development Bill Regulations 2001 as amendment, which in effect means that it stipulates a fee of $360 per square metre rate, which is proving to be prohibitive to the provision of this vital infrastructure, that this infrastructure has been identified in Action Plan for Jobs and a recent report from Grant Thornton. So, in a reply to a parliamentary question, I was told that there's no plans to, just in final, we have no plans to amend the planning fees at this time, which, to clarify, isn't what I asked. What I asked for was that the film studios would be given a new class. So, in other words, Class 4, Section 2 stays as it is. But for both the provision of the application fee for large-scale studios, this has proven to be, you know, a really inordinately high cost. And the second thing is that when it comes to development contribution schemes, it likewise follows that it's treated in the same way as other commercial types of premises, where you know, that scale of it would be on the range of an IKEA, basically, which is a totally different ballgame. Has, you know, a footfall all the year round. God knows how many cash registers on duty all the time, and very full and very active. Whereas a film studio is something that may be used for 3 months of the year, high intensity. It may be part and parcel of the overall package, which means location shoots. And another reason why Wicklow is so popular is because it's less than an hour from the airport. The whole backdrop is the mountain range, valleys, Glendalough, Rathdrum, Bargot Square is being used in Michael Collins films, in ads, because you have 4 different aspects to it, and people can set up. And my own in-laws own the post office there, and I think during one spell it was painted about 3 times a year for different and repainted back. So that just gives you a flavour of what potential is there. But the studio is a part of a very vital part, but it's not the only part. So I feel that what I'm asking here is that it be recognised as such. I can short-circuit some of the expert reviews findings and tell you that this will be one that will be absolutely has to be in it. So I welcome the Minister's response. And it's very pertinent that Minister Deenahan is here, because he has visited the studios in Ashford, I know, in the past. He's well aware of it, and as a previous Minister for Arts and Heritage and the Gaeltacht, and with responsibility for the film industry, I think he probably has a fair appreciation of what I'm talking about. So thank you, Cahirla.
Mr. Steele, Jimmy Deenan, you have 4 minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here actually to answer this question on behalf of Minister Kelly, and it gives me an opportunity just to refer to Ashford and what's happening down there, and also to Ardmore as well, and just to recognise the initiative of Joseph O'Connell and his family in providing free to the state Ashford Studios, where we have the very successful Viking TV series now ongoing, and I understand to be continued, and that is really very successful in the USA at the moment and also around the world. And it's because of his initiative, really, that we're in a position to host this. I've been there on site, and I've seen the studios there, the studio space, which is built to very high spec. The same with Ardmore. Delighted that Penny Dreadfuls now has taken over all of that studio space, and very successful as well. And the Irish film industry, I was delighted to have the opportunity of extending Section 481 and also increasing the benefit to 32%, which is now one of the best in the world, let me say, and also to introduce a Tom Cruise clause, which in other words, that major actors from outside the European Union would be seen as part of the overall budget. So I was delighted to do all that when I was Minister for the Arts. Just another point as well, that Steven Spielberg, when he was here, I met him with the Taoiseach at that time, and said he would love to do film in Ireland, provided he had a studio space of 60,000 square feet. I understand Mr. O'Connell is prepared to provide that with some assistance from government. Just planning authorities in Ireland receive 20 to 30,000 planning applications a year in recent years, down from a peak of over 90,000 in 2006, which cover everything from house extensions to large developments. The consideration of planning applications by planning authorities is resource intensive and expensive. A planning application must be extensively checked and validated to ensure compliance with the regulations, with a view to ensuring in particular the right of the public to participate. Each application also requires thorough assessment in line with the county development plan and to comply with our obligations under the EU environmental directives. Planning application fees yielded in the order of 7.7 million revenue in 2012 to local authorities to run a system which employed 1,343 staff, of which 227 were professional and technical staff. The annual financial statement for the local government sector states that in 2012, expenditure by local authorities on forward planning was nearly €37.2 million, and on development management was just under 88.5 million euro, making total local authority expenditure and planning of 125.7 million euro. Can be seen, therefore, that the amount of income received in fees is only a fraction of the cost of running the planning service. Section 2 of Schedule 9 of the Planning and Development Regulations 2001, as amended, sets out the scale of fees for all planning applications. These include the provision of a house, €65, maintenance, improvement, or other alteration of an existing house, including any works for the provision of an extension, €34. Regarding Class 4 that Deputy Doyle referred to, provision of other buildings, €80 for each building, or €3.60 for each square metre of gross floor space to be provided, whichever is greater. This is subject to a maximum of €38,000 for any planning application. Class 4 therefore includes the provision of buildings for commercial, retail, industrial, manufacturing purposes, and includes studios. The fees, €3.60 for each square metre of gross floor space in respect of studios, are therefore the same for any other commercial development. It should be noted also that the fee payable for applications for permission for strategic infrastructure development made directly to An Bord Pleanála is the economic cost of dealing with these applications. In other words, the fee involved would be considerably more than for applications to the planning authority. While the planning regulations are generally kept under review in the Department of the Environment, Community and Local Government, I understand that Minister Kelly has no plans to reduce the planning fees at this time, either generally or in respect to studios. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. Deputy Dáil, you have 2 minutes for a supplementary.
Yeah, okay. I thank the Minister and appreciate that he's reading off a script prepared on behalf by Ministers Kelly's office, and just unfortunately, the last phrase says no plans to reduce the planning fees at this time. What I'm asking here is that this particular piece of infrastructure be treated in a different way, and I don't accept that it is that onerous to actually process a film studio application in the same way as large commercial buildings, which might have, like, there's a visual impact, there's a noise, there's a sound, noise. There's very little by way of, threats to damage the environment by effluent or anything else. The film industry is very mobile. New Zealand, some parts of Eastern Europe are very active and will compete. Now, Section 482 is very helpful. And certainly a very big incentive, and we have the expertise. People and people who are involved in film production, be it actors or producers, like being around. They like Ireland, they like Dublin, they like being near it. So it is important that we recognise those facts and talk to the people in the industry, because if we don't address this, unfortunately, we run the risk of not having enough of studio space, and it is a limiting factor. Say 5,000 more jobs, 1 billion annually into this country, can be leveraged if we can provide them with the full package, and this is part of it. So I don't accept that that we need to reduce the planning fees in total. We need to look at this particular piece of infrastructure and look at the film industry and say, is it worth going after? We're giving incentives through the IDA and others. We're giving all sorts of incentives to bring in jobs. This is to indigenous people to actually provide the infrastructure for this industry to locate and pick Ireland. They want to, so we should help them. Thank you.
Deputy Minister, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, again, I can understand where Deputy Doyle is coming from. And when you look, for example, at what they have achieved in Belfast with an old building that was used by Holland and Wolff, and they've turned it into a studio. For example, they got the Dracula movie because they had the necessary space. And also in London, for example, the Greater London area, they're taking in about $1 billion American dollars at the moment of business from Hollywood in that area, generally because they have the studio space. So this is a critical issue, and I agree with Deputy Doyle, will have to be in some way addressed if we have to continue the progress we're making in a very vibrant film industry in this country at this moment of time, which is growing. And just to remind people again, the planning application fee in respect to the studio is €3.6 for each square metre of gross floor space to be provided, subject to a maximum of €38,000. This is the same application fee applicable to all types of building other than individual houses and agricultural buildings. That is the same as for the provision of buildings for commercial, retail, industrial and manufacturing purposes. It's unclear why a special case should be made, this is the script here, should be made for studios as opposed to all these other types of buildings. But just could I say that if that is the maximum, 38,000, I think that apart from planning fees consideration, I think there should be other incentives given as well to people who are prepared to develop studios. In this particular case, I think that these people have invested a huge amount already with no state aid. So hopefully when there's a review of the whole, I suppose, supports for the film industry, that this is something that can be considered. And I certainly will deliver what Deputy Dáil has said here today to the Minister. Thank you.
Thanks, Minister. The second topical issue selected in the name of Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice to ask to the Minister for Jobs, Enterprise and Innovation the funding requirement for fabrication operators to comply with more compliance, and Deputy Fitzmaurice has 4 minutes.
Thank you, Les Concorla. Minister, last July in 2014, a directive came into Ireland, EN 1090, and what it is basically, to simplify it, is that guys or people around the country that have small fabricating works and even large fabrication works have to get new quality assurance and certification. And first of all, the problem was that nobody knew about it, even though it was 8 years being kicked around in Europe. As we got word of it, and actually I only got word of it last December, we sort of started highlighting the need, because to bear in mind that these people have come through a recession. These are people, say, were SMEs, 2 and 3 and 1 and 5 people working in it around the country. And next thing, to comply with this, figures start coming out of between 15 to 30,000 to get this EN 1090, to get the qualifications like an ISO. And look, obviously there was pandemonium in the whole sector, and I actually, rang a few departments, could get no information, had to actually ring England to see what were they doing about it, and to get it simplified and brought down to understand everything about it. And what it entails, Minister, is that the ordinary guy there abroad in an ordinary shed in any part, be it your own part of Ireland or any part of Ireland that does work for, be it builders or farmers or whatever, because there's 4 different categories in it. They have to start off and they have to get all their welds tested, and then there's things like a welding coordinator course, and they have to get certified. And all this paperwork, when you get people with letters after their name, they seem to charge fair high figures to get you in line. And they cannot actually price for work, and work is actually being lost in different regions at the moment because of it, and there is a fear out there with the smaller operators. A lot of them are on about shutting shop now, and I know, look, we are all in favour of creating jobs, but we must hold what's there as well, Minister. And in Roscommon, in fairness, in the Leo, I've been in contact with Leo, I've been in contact with NSAI. We held meetings in Claremorris to try and explain it to people what was going on, and Coach Kinney in Roscommon has been fabulous in trying to, coordinate something to try and bring a bit of a sort of reason into this. And there was prices being quoted that were just extortionate prices, being quite frank about it. But if we don't do something about it, be it through Leo, we have SkillNet and we have Solace, these people will either decide to